Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the January 22nd meeting of the GLIMPRINT IMAG MSM Working Group. This is our first meeting for 2026, and we're trying something new today. We're going to have Jacob starting a new series of discussions on the lessons learned from modeling COVID. As always, Tom, Jim Sluka, Lorenzo, and myself are available for questions and comments. We have various communication channels that work better if we use them. Please help us distribute our invites and information so that people can know about our activities. We have the web page still at NIH that can promote your publications. If you want to get those updated and distributed, send them to Jim Sluka. They'll be happy to help you get them up. Same for the GLIMPRINT site. If there's news, any content you want to put up, we can help you get it up there. If you want to help us out with web editing, we'd be appreciative of that as well. We have a quite full schedule coming up, starting at the beginning of February. We have two talks coming from Jacob's effort in the Lessons of COVID series, and also our regular seminar series. So we have a very full schedule of talks on a wide variety of topics, and please help us get the news out about that and try to build an audience for these talks. And we need to remind people about the current events in the community. The roadmap for the European Virtual Twin is out. People should take a look at that. Lisbeth and her collaborators in Europe have really done an amazing job in building a strategy for the development of medical digital twins. The European Union is putting a lot of effort behind that, and I think it's worth thinking about how to coordinate with that. I should also mention that the VPH is having their annual meeting in Milan in the fall, and they have a deadline for submission of talks coming up in February. CFAR is going to have a summer school in May on multi-scale human modeling. This is coming out of the work of Maria and others. Maria might be able to tell us a little bit more about that. But I think that that is a very exciting opportunity for people, and I encourage people to find out more about that and participate. We're going to have a steering committee meeting tomorrow at 11 a.m. as usual, after our workshop meetings. Are there other short announcements? I have one short announcement, which is we are trying to organize a mini symposium or two for Society for Mathematical Biology, European Society for Mathematical and Theoretical Biology, that will be held in Graz, Austria, in July 13th through 17th. The deadline for mini symposia is coming up at the end of next week. Lorenzo is in the process of organizing one or two mini symposia for that meeting. If you're going to be at SMB and Graz and you want to participate, please email Lorenzo or text him here in the chat to let him know, because he's putting together the proposals for the mini symposia. As people probably know, SMB, there's no funding available, so it's not that joining a mini symposium provides travel or anything else, but if you are planning on being at SMB and you want to give a talk related to immune modeling and medical digital twins infrastructure, or experiments related to that, Lorenzo would be happy to take your name and ideas and see if we can organize that into a focus group around the GLIMPRINT theme. Are there any other announcements before we get started? Okay, I will turn the floor over to Jacob.
I already started, I gave the first part of the talk a while ago. Today it's supposed to be a discussion, so James, you'll be very busy, I hope, with allowing people to speak. Because we got to the last talk up until chapter 12 in our lessons learned paper. I'm going to just remind you. There was a preprint that we published. We have several authors. One of them I saw Kyoda here on the talk, so he might join and say some things. But we had multiple authors. We're not sure where it's going to go from a preprint, but because the group is kind of dissipated, but there was a lot of work done, and I covered it all. And today I want to take the time to actually discuss things that during our talk we kind of left all of those till the end. I ended at chapter 11 last talk, and this I would actually like to hear your opinion. And this will be the start of discussion in the series. We already have two people in the series. You said it before, but it's on. Here, I'll show it. It's on February 19th. Philip Garley is going to talk about what he did with ensemble models. This is very, very advanced technology. And here, Andy is an expert in economics. So those are two elements that in lessons learned will be very interesting. This is on top of the lessons learned paper. So we're going to talk later how we're going to do this lessons learned series, but hopefully there'll be many more talks after that. Those are the first two that we secured so far. So let me explain what happened here. We have several sections that we kind of bunched together, several things that may or may not seem related, but this is kind of like a mix of things. So the topic, the title for this, for chapter 2, was determining means of dissemination information to the public. But some of it has to do with infrastructure and records and how to train experts and how to educate things. So it's not necessarily only things, and eventually not things related to dissemination also alone. It's also related to research. So we put all of those together in chapter 12. And here I believe that everyone here many of you were at the beginning of the viral pandemics working group, and they seen many things happening. And of course, some of you participated in the modeling. So I would like to get some feedback, and then at the end, if as time permits, we will go over and we'll talk about how the format will be in the next of the series, so to get an idea how this webinar series is going to work. So the first topic was like the overall reaching title was determining means of dissemination information to the public. So we realized in our lessons learned paper that the public should be aware of limitations of the models and the data collected, because if the public is not aware, it brings in many problems. So presenting the larger picture was important. And when reporting model results, it's important to be able to trace back all the information to ensure reproducibility. This is actually, there's an anecdote in our viral pandemic working group. It's kind of, the emails are still out there. You can see that we found out some data source that was used that was not obtained in the most ethical way, let's say it like that. And modelers still used it for modeling. So we later on, this data source disappeared, by the way. So you could not be traced back. But even things that were published could not be traced back later on. If today you look for data back on, you will see some of it disappeared as well. Some of it that was quite valid and kept at the time. So this is an important point that we need to improve in the future, because data can be reused after the pandemic as well as during the pandemic. And if we have a public that trusts us and links don't move and the data is there in the same place and everything is correct, then it will have better, they will better follow the policies that are enacted by the government. Also, we noticed that a lot of the commotion was because the authorities worldwide would not admit errors. We think that they should admit errors quickly and humbly. At this point, I would like James or anyone else to actually comment on what I showed before we hop on to the next topic. I want to start the discussion going.
I think that these are important points. I would say that Edith group, led by Lisbeth, has thought quite a bit about the ethical and social components. And so their working group paper which has quite extensive discussions, more on the issues of privacy and ethics, perhaps, than some of these issues of public communication, because they're focusing on in-host twins. And also that in the RDA Immune Digital Twin group that Anna Mirakis and Reinhardt lead, there are consultants specifically focusing on the ethics and communication issues. I think from the point of view of our working group here and the seminar series, you might want to think about inviting Philip Ball again. We had invited him to speak at the October virtual workshop, and he wasn't available on those dates, but he did indicate that he would be available. And as a science journalist, he was very heavily involved in understanding the process by which information was disseminated, misinformation, disinformation in that period, and also tracking some of the sociological, political, and economic repercussions thereof. And so I would think that he might be somebody who would be able to provide some really important insights into the issues that you're raising here.
I would love to invite more people who wrote things related to lessons learned. What you're suggesting, for example, Lisbeth, did they do any COVID modeling and they have some sort of manuscript about it, like what the lessons learned, or are they thinking from things they saw from someone else, or is it just something related? I don't know. You mentioned some work that they're doing.
Well, they have an extensive road mapping and planning document, which is guidance for creation of medical digital twins. So they're not specifically focusing on epidemiological modeling or the past. They're looking forward to how do we do these things in the future. So while their roadmap document would certainly talk about these issues, it's not going to be presenting them in a historical way, even though the contents of that document would be informed by the history.
Okay, so the part that's informed by the history, if they have it in the document, I can analyze it and add it to the database that I have of other people who wrote. Because what I'm showing here is only things our group, small group, has written down as things that are important. Later on, when I read other articles of lessons learned, I found out that some of them covered to some degree what we wrote here. Some of them actually had a little bit more extensive about it. But this we'll see at the end of the series, because we're going to talk about it at the end, but we're actually going to analyze all of those lessons learned to the degree that people can follow them more easily. So there's a thing about computing infrastructure. High performance computing now is required. I'm sure Lorenzo and James know what I'm talking about because of their cell modeling, because it needs a lot of compute. But compute power is not the issue anymore, because today you have abundance of cloud infrastructure, and it's only a matter of money and how to go get funding to do this. And during the pandemic, I must say, I got funding. I didn't get funding for developing the tools, but for if I needed to use some cloud tool, then there was money available for me to use it. So the multiple companies, like outside academia or even within academia, used cloud infrastructure by industrial companies. This was not the problem. The problem became the software tools. The software tools need to be modernized. I'll give an example of the tool that I use. To do my ensemble model, I used the tool that I started developing 20 years ago, more or less, 19 years ago, actually. This is what there was. So it's like 2 decades old. In software, it means 5 generations by now. 3 or 4, depends how fast you look at it. Now there needs to be newer tools to do this that specifically support something like ensemble modeling, and more specifically ability to explain rather than focus, because a lot of the modeling, the epidemiological modeling, was done to focus what's going to happen. But we could not even explain what was happening. So how can we focus? So there should be more focus on tools that are doing this. And I want to reveal, I'm now working on a new version of a tool that will replace what I did like 20 years ago. We will use modern technology. But I'm not the only one, and those tools should be abundant, and there should be a way to actually develop them.
You're absolutely spot on with it on this, Jacob. The challenge is the funding. No, there is not a single agency that will just give you money to go develop a software tool. Especially, it's always the boring thing to them to support, and so it's been very difficult. It always has to be focused on solving some specific biological question that happens to develop a software tool around it. And so then it becomes extremely difficult in academia, the traditional academic setting, to develop a enterprise level scalable software infrastructure.
I have good news there, because even the software programmers are going to go away. I no longer write code. There is no need anymore. AI writes the code for me much, much better than I would.
I think you're right. It will help. I don't know to what degree. So for non-deep tech software, I think this is happening. It'll be interesting to see how this is useful for deep tech, simulation, the type of stuff that we're developing. That's not just, a website or online shop and things like that. So I'm not disagreeing. I'm interested to see what happens.
Okay, so you'll see what happens from this perspective. The good news is that the deep tech stuff can be done by those machines even better. You will be surprised. I was amazed, and I've been doing it for a long time. It's something that happened in the last half a year, approximately. Now the tools are there. I can tell you here, there's a project that I did for a company called Space Cowboy. This has to do with collisions in space and all sorts of stuff that involves orbital mechanics. The AI could do orbital mechanics.
Really?
I am not kidding you. They can do research today at a very high level. You will be amazed. So
Which
these are the
model are
good
you
news.
using for that sort of stuff? Which model are you using for that sort of stuff?
For the orbital mechanics, I use Gemini, but
Gemini,
I actually
really?
kept everything there as a recording to show how it's done. Also, it's important for documentation purposes. But I'm doing other things with other tools. The competition is fierce between them, and they're all not bad. So
Mhm.
if the thing that you thought that like half a year ago or 2 years ago, you say, "Oh, I need $1 million." No, you need a couple of weeks. In your sabbatical, in a month, you'll write the software yourself. I kid you not. I kid you not. If you know what you're doing and you've done this a little bit, you don't need any more. You don't need to hire programmers and do other things unless your operation is big and needs something very specific. The tools have matured to the point that now I can tell you they can eliminate a lot of the programming effort. I will reveal later on. For now, I'll keep some things a secret because I do want to stay in business.
If the heavy weightlifting can be done by AI, which is what we all hope for, after all, is one of the best use we can have for it, then it remains the big problem is always the same. We should decide together and agree on standards and way to do things so that what you do works well with that, what I do, what Tom's do, and in the future, the next generation won't have to reinvent the wheel because we have put bases that they will be able to reuse. AI, it works partially because they have done this way. They have built bricks and then they have started building with those bricks different, more complex stuff.
So I wanted to say I just got back late last night from Duke University, where they have the new NIH National Center of Excellence in Multiscale Modeling for immune system. And they have a team of about 9 people devoted to software infrastructure. And they are very interested in hearing from the community about what is needed in terms of standardization, how to modularize software components, how to interconnect across scales, how to distribute software so that it's executable in cloud and other non-local formats and reusable. And so I think the problem is so big that maybe even 9 people isn't enough full-time to be dealing with it. However, they are in the mode of trying to understand what the community wants and trying to work with the community as a national resource for this. And so it's worth reaching out to look for MISM. I'll pull up their website in a second and put it in the chat. But I would think that it would be useful to reach out to them. It's a new center. They're just getting started. They've been around about 6 months. But I think that they take some of these ideas quite seriously in terms of infrastructure, and they're still trying to get a sense of what the community thinks is the most important way forward. And so I think we should be grateful to NIH for creating an institution like that and also trying to engage with them. And we are, as part of the seminar series, going to have several of their people speak. We had them speak. The director of the center spoke in October in our conference. I agree with Tom that there's so much to do that there's an unlimited need for effort in this area. Iran and his DARPA project at Connecticut are certainly working on parts of this. The AI systems, once you've decided what you want to do, are extremely useful for coding and reduce the burden. They can help you refine your ideas once you start with some ideas, but you still have to start them. And so having the community define ideas about what's needed, what standards are needed, and so on, I think is really important. They have a number of good AI experts at Duke, and he said, give me a language to describe X as a standard. And he said it took 2 solid weeks of compute time, which is a lot on an AI system. And it came back with something that was really quite good. And so now, of course, sometimes these things come back with things that are rubbish. So one does need to have some judgment. But setting the priorities is critical here. We don't want the AI to set the priorities for us. It may help us refine the priorities once we start with the list or remind us what we've left out. But I think we do want humans in the loop still in this area.
I agree with the human in the loop. It's still necessary. We don't want to give too much rails for AI, not yet, and maybe never. I did forget to give my conflict of interest statement. Unlike many of you here, I'm not an academic. I actually have patents on technology related to disease modeling. So whatever you say here, remember. So we talked about computing infrastructure. The next thing is centralize the epidemiological and clinical records. So this is Philippe Castiglione. He wrote most of this section, and he said that we need a lot of infrastructure, data lake, dashboards, and visualization, real-time analytics, machine learning interface today with AI as well, access to electronic health records of infected individuals. All of this is necessary. However, there are obstacles. We have different standards and protocol, different geopolitical considerations. Now, we need some common agreement between entities, and this is what Lorenzo and James just said. So we need to get to the level that there is some agreement. I'm talking about not necessarily all the biology. I'm talking about specifically pandemic, but this is important for other things as well. We need the best centralization possible within limitations. The problem was in the pandemics that the data was all over, it was scattered, and we couldn't find it. This is one of the major problems. So the idea is to actually make it a little bit better for the next time. So Now, there were good attempts, good examples that were made. As the Midas Network is actually part of this webinar series as well. And the DHL master question list, those were attempts to actually centralize data, but we need to do it better than we did in the last pandemic. And the most important thing perhaps is how to address clinical data, because not everyone should have access to it. And then the question is, how can we make it better? So I'll throw that out for discussion here, and we'll see what you can come up with it.
So NIAID in the US has created the NIAID Data Ecosystem Discovery Portal, which doesn't pull in data directly, but tries to make finding, especially clinical related data sets and experimental data sets, more accessible. I have not used it, so I can't tell you how successful you're going to be when you use it, but they are certainly encouraging people to try to let them know about data resources and make those available. Of course, when you're talking about clinical data, you have all of the usual issues about privacy. Europe in particular is very restrictive on data for clinical studies. The Edith roadmap paper talks about those issues in great detail. That's one reason that they're so focused on those areas. And of course, if you're within the UK data system, you have access to potentially to very large-scale clinical records within their biobank databases. So there are efforts in this area. How you work with them and how easy or hard they are to work with varies a lot. I'm certainly not an expert on this, but again, the NIAID was discussing how they feel that this is a critically important topic, and our old friend Reid Shadman, who's participated over the years in many of these seminars and discussion groups, in particular, believes strongly in making as much data as possible available in an appropriate way. And so it might be worth coming back to talk to Reid more. Maybe Reid could talk specifically about this issue in a seminar.
Do you know of anything he wrote specifically about COVID modeling, or anything that he criticized? That he didn't have to do the work himself, but if he criticized or wrote how to make things better, like because of COVID modeling, then we can take his paper, analyze it, add it to the database, like we did for many others.
Well, so if I go to the NIAID data ecosystem link that I just shared in the chat, and I go to the discovery portal, they highlight asthma, COVID, HIV, influenza, malaria, and tuberculosis as areas of interest. So I'm not sure that counts as a lessons learned, but they certainly are trying to make COVID data available through their portal. So Reid Shadman is the lead for funding and community development in this area at NIAID and in Washington.
Okay, now I understand the context. So he should be contacted and we can tell him about his lessons learned and see if their database have something with more lessons learned for us to process. Because I do have a database of my own by now.
Well, we've already invited Reid to give a seminar for our series. But we didn't specifically ask him to talk about this issue. He also funds other kinds of research related to immune modeling, and has an interest in that. So he wears multiple hats, like many of us. And so if we wanted to have him address specifically this issue of data availability, it's possible that he would send you to somebody else at NIH and say, well, he's the overall supervisor, but in fact, somebody else within that team is the one who's most responsible for data portal. But there was quite a bit of discussion about trying to make data findable and reusable and accessible. They're very interested in metadata annotation standards and improving metadata annotation so that data sets are more comparable. They're very concerned about how do you aggregate incompatible data sets. So they're thinking about really critical issues. They're concerned about privacy. How do you maintain privacy while making data accessible? They're very smart about these things and very experienced. And they work closely with Midas and others.
Oh,
The
okay.
the I should say also the Duke group has 3 scales of operation. The scale that I live at, which is in-host tissue modeling, a molecular scale where they're looking at antibody specificity and design of more effective vaccines and more effective antivirals and immune modulators. And then a 3rd scale, which is more classic epidemiology, which is very closely coordinated with MIDAS and would be more classic, trying to map infection trajectories and how to control them and diagnose them and monitor them. So they have people, for example, in October, we had a person from Stanford who was doing Fitbit detection, early detection of infection as a technology. They have people doing that to try to do early detection of disease. And so I think that there are people at Duke who are very much involved in the epidemiology side and the public health side as well. Again, I'm pretty far from that myself, so I'm not the person to be recommending specific individuals, but I think it's worth talking to them about those issues. They're thinking about them in a serious way, and it's very tightly integrated with the national priorities from NIH.
Very nice. Okay, you gave us a lot of food for thought. I'm taking those links down and writing them, and later on I'll probably bother you or someone else for probably introductions. But I do want to say one thing here about the clinical data elements. The fact that clinical data is private is not such a big problem for an ensemble model, because if you wrap the data with the model and then we share it, then there aren't that many problems. But then again, I'm biased about ensemble models. I have patents. And this is why I kind of wanted to say this, because this is one solution that may be useful. The next topic is education and training experts on recently emerging technologies. Again, the century-old SIR model is still dominant. It's a problem, not a solution. Unfortunately, I really I'm deeply sad about it. I see many modelers who value the mathematical genius or whatever, and what the SIR model can do, what it can do. It's 100-year-old tool. Your garage doesn't have something working which perhaps is 20 years old, even in the garage. Think about cell phones, or think about everyday appliances. TVs from 20 years old. We're talking about a century-old mathematical equation. We have much, much, much better tools today, yet still a lot of academia clings to it as if it's like, I wouldn't say how it is, I won't compare it, but like, this clinging should go away and explore in your technologies. Unfortunately, this is my opinion. If someone has a different opinion, please voice it. Just in contrast, it is a discussion after all. But there's new and emerging technologies. I'm biased for ensemble models, but there are other technologies as well that should get in and should get more attention, especially with the high performance computing power that we're having today. And also one more thing that I noticed that, and this may be solved by AI, is that many experts in disease modeling do not have in-depth programming background, which today is a hurdle. So those are some topics. I threw them out there. Some of them are quite controversial. Please, it's a discussion.
I'd say that one of the problem often is that simple is easy to justify, and then it's easy to adopt. Complex is less easy to justify, but I agree with you that we should try to do complex because it covers more of what we observe in real life. But that's why I think sometimes we stick to simpler stuff or older stuff because it's easy to justify. Say, okay, at least it's ironclad, then we know what's going on there. I'm not saying that is the right thing, but I feel this is what might be happening sometime.
Yeah, I think James Luca wants to say something.
SIR is not still dominant. NIH maintains more than a dozen different models using all kinds of different mathematical approaches, using ensembles, using AI, using 57 other things. SIR is no longer dominant, hasn't been for years.
Unfortunately, the publications don't agree with you. If you look at the most publications, you'll find very few about ensembles, very few about other technologies. Most of them are variations of SIR, SEIR, SAR. This is what I encountered. But hopefully this is going away. Hopefully what you're saying is good news. There are some solutions for what we talk about. Is basically the solutions are we need to train experts on version control, database system, and new modeling techniques. People should be trained on this. This is for academia. How many courses do people have on ensemble models or agent-based models? Or that I'm talking about people who take biology.
Hi, Jacob. My question was about whether you're speaking about the specific SIR model with only 3 compartments, or whether you're speaking about compartmental models as a whole, as like an entire field of models that we can use.
Yeah, so if you're talking about the variations of SIR and you call it the complementary models, then yes, I'm talking about the entire set of this. Because if it's like they add 3 letters, if it's an I, if it's an E, or sometimes it's something else because they model something, it's basically the same idea of the SIR model. Compartmental models, basically differential equations. All of the variations of the SIR models, which are mostly compartmental models, yes, I'm kind of against them because they model a group. And yes, you can start splitting them down, but if you split them down, they become agents eventually. And there's agent-based modeling. It allows you to model all those agents much, much better. So why not just transfer to agent-based models? So this is where I'm against. Like agent-based models have been around for, I know, 60, 70, 50 years. They're approximately, maybe I'm wrong, but basically they're driven by computing power, but not by differential equations. I'm not saying differential equations are bad. Some people will argue that they are faster and better for some things, but generally speaking, they shouldn't be the big mess because they're really limited. And of course, it's time for newer technologies to emerge. This is my opinion. You can have a different one. I heard people who can argue against me.
Thanks for sharing.
One more thing that is important. This is something that I believe John Rice this is initial idea at some point when we started talking about it, is that we should have organized model drills. So think about people who are reservists that appear once a month or once a year for a month, and they drill on some disease, and this disease is known because it was generated artificially. And actually, Philip Gurley, who is going to talk about in February 19th, he's going to talk exactly about a drill like that. They did some work. I'm not sure it's a drill that they're going to do it all the time, but the idea is that you'll have a specific workforce that knows to use the newest models on those drills, that you know what the outcomes is and see if you can, with modeling, you can achieve it. And of course, later on, you can have either hackathons or drills or researchers joining or doing also learning from those. And of course, there'll be some national and local governments collaboration to actually make it even better. So we're not talking about people who are there doing it all the time, but people who jump like once a year or twice a year to do the drill. And then when the epidemic happens, then they are drilled and they know what they're doing with the newest tools, with the best tools that there are for that point. So this is one point that some of the solutions that we talked about, how to improve the problem, and it's beyond the SIR issue. I'm moving away from the controversy. I'm moving towards solutions. If anyone wants to comment on this, please.
How do we convince the public of the accuracy of the models? Because I think, coming from COVID, there is a lot of skepticism about the accuracy of these models, and the negativity around it, I think, actually creates an activation energy or level of credibility that we didn't have before that we need to overcome first. It's a much deeper issue now. Even if the models are better than the public thinks they are, there is a net negative sort of a gap of trust that needs to be bridged first.
How are you defining accuracy with respect to data fitting or with respect to forecasting or some other measure?
Doesn't matter really. What does the public, how does the public view, the accuracy of these models, right? When it came to policy making, then backtrack, and if that's the outcome, what is the metric for public to trust our models? And then I would backtrack, reverse engineer what are the metrics that we need to focus on at the model at the technical level that will map into that publicly understandable metric of accuracy.
I went back a few slides. Yes, those are the problems that we're talking about here in this section. And if we get all of the speakers for the lesson learned series, you'll see many of them actually address that. In the database, for what I analyzed about the lessons learned, there are many people who targeted this specific point much, much more in detail than we did here. With examples and so on and so forth, you will be amazed. I just hope that we can get all of those people to speak. There's some things I disagree with what some of the people wrote, but their conclusions, a lot of them were trying to, the fact that even at all you're trying to say what was wrong and try to repair it is something that many people try to do, and that's why we're doing this series. We do hope to answer your question, but yes, it's a valid question. We don't know the answer.
I don't know if you touched upon the reproducibility aspect, right? So when someone is claiming something, if someone independently validates this, that's very important for public trust, I guess. So if there's a common place where people put their claims and then someone says, "Oh, I independently tested this and it's making sense," or it's valid, then probably you can kind of give a bit more confidence, and maybe not one, maybe two, given the challenge. Maybe that could bring a bit more confidence in the public. So it can be reproducibility, it can be even validation using different data set from different sources and so on to indeed convey the point this model is trustworthy. Show that this approach has worked in the past. Maybe when you had other pandemics, use those data sets and say, see, this model does a decent job in predicting the outcome, and we applied the same method here and in this current situation, and this is what the model suggests, and this is the best bet we can do at the moment based on the technology and everything we have, and then people probably will accept, okay, this is the reasonable thing we could do, sensible thing we could do at this moment based on the suggestion of the model and so on.
I agree, reproducibility helps. And other things that may help, and this brings us to the next topic, I just don't want to run out of time without going over everything, is that the press, which magnifies whatever the modelers are doing, should be aware of model capabilities, model shortcomings. People didn't understand what the model is saying and why, and they were talking about one model and not showing the entire ensemble of models that were out there. All of those things should be educated beforehand. Press should be part of the process, even when doing those drills that I'm talking about. There should be websites, articles, educational interviews of modelers, all of those just to explain what happens. But even before the pandemic, during the pandemic, they're just too busy. One more thing, modelers saying something doesn't mean the public understands. The journalists usually speak the language that the public understands better because they remove all the technical jargon away to make the people understand. So this may be partially a solution to help people understand better, and perhaps part of the problem. Part of the solution to the problem. And more importantly, journalists sometimes are used to glorify this or that model for this university or that institution. This should go away. This should be more technical. Oh, this model says this and this and this. It's good for that, not good for that. Things like that. And the journalist should be able to break it down and very, very nicely without glorifying and how good or how bad it is. Because part of the thing is people are led to believe that those models can predict things. I'm Jewish. We have a saying, and I'll translate. I won't say the Hebrew one, but like prophecy was given to the fools. This is a saying in Hebrew. And basically, we don't believe in prophets, Jewish people. So we don't want the models to become our next prophets. We'll come to the last part, unless someone wants to really comment and go back. Here is the last part of research that is an important one that is still not being researched properly. So we do have microsimulation, ensemble agents. Those require a lot of computing power, but today we also have GPUs, and we have compiler technology that can make things much better. Number is only one word, but there are a bunch of tools out there that can do things quickly and very easily. CUDA can parallelize, but not necessarily only CUDA. There are many other tools that now can parallelize. And I have a secret. I'm working on something like this now, but many more people should be working on the new technology to replace the old SRR technology out there. And believe it or not, this technology is accessible to modelers. It doesn't have to. You don't have to be an expert, especially if you have AI technology. So, and one more thing, we need to improve the assembling speed of ensemble models. To take an ensemble model, you take many pieces from many locations and have to put them together. This has to be something that should be specified tools to do to make it better. And this is something that I think about. This is the last slide.
If you go back to that previous slide, so HPC is absolutely critical, no doubt about it. And the use case for HPC, the way I think about it, and we think about it in our group, is that HPC is useful for when you're doing mass level simulations and mass experiments. But what there needs to be is an infrastructure that allows you to do real-time interactive simulations where you can actually go and play with the model in real time and interact with it. What happens if you change this parameter? What happens if you change that parameter? And not only have the case where you submit a simulation and you wait for hours or days to get results back from a HPC. So I think those are the two pillars for the computational infrastructure that needs to be that we need for these models.
The good news is that AI is coming to help. Believe me, they change this parameter or not, that in combination with the HPC, think about changing all parameters and sending it out to HPC and then collect all the results. You don't need to wait that way. And today, the technologies that run things on GPU can make it faster. You don't have to wait months. So this is why I'm saying research should go in that direction. And hopefully I'll reach out to you and show you something in the last slide. And please feel free to interject, because I don't know, no one's pressing me on time, but I see time is going away. So COVID-19, we collected a lot of data. How many people are still mining it and modeling and trying to figure out whether they could have done better? Except of me. A few. I know that Philip Garley is going to do something they're going to show something in February 19th that's related. But like, how many more people have done this? How many people model COVID compared to how many of them are actually still digging into this archaeological data and trying to figure out, could have we done better? That's the question. At this point, I don't know, people need to leave, and I understand your time constraints, so I finished everything. I do want to tell you again, we still don't know, it's an open question, whether we can scientifically understand or model a disease, like forecast a disease. We don't know whether even if we have perfect data, whether we can actually forecast what's going to happen. It's still scientifically unproven that we can with the data that we collected. So this is an important scientific theoretical question needs to be addressed. Another question is whether and under what conditions can we apply research to the future pandemic with what we do have now? Because we do need to improve it, and we need to figure out ways how to do it better than we did before, because in this last pandemic we didn't do well. Present company included. It's like I could have done better. So those are things that I'm throwing out there for discussion. I don't know how much time there is. James will monitor time and
I
tell me.
think we're at the end of our hour. We've spent an hour going over things. So you raised a great set of points. Perhaps we could have some individual sessions where we pick one of these and we have some readings beforehand and then come back and spend an hour on one of these, because any one of these topics could easily be an hour conversation.
Okay, so what we're going to do is, before, and I tell it up front, in the series, what I'm going to do is each person who presents lesson learned, I'm sending them their lessons learned, and then we'll show it at the beginning. And then at the end, they'll tell us, they'll know up front that this is going to go happen, and they'll know what we collected on their papers. And then we're going to ask them a bunch of questions like this. And tomorrow in the steering committee, I'm going to show you a bit some of the questions, and we'll see if we can get a few more to get an answer from each one of the speakers.
Okay, well, thank you for taking the initiative on this, Jacob, and for walking us through this nice bullet point list of problems. You've done a great job of pulling together a bunch of topics that are of great importance, and I want to thank you for that.
I thank you for the opportunity to show it here.